Hey everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to Architectural Photography and Composition. I've received quite a few emails, particularly from young photographers just starting out in their business, asking me basically how I run my business. This is personal and everyone has their own way of doing business, but I have found that in the decades that I've been doing my work, there are a couple of kind of absolutes about running a business that I want to share with you, and I hope that these will be of help. I want to start out with billing. Now, I have a whole list of rules of doing business and being a professional. That's in my ebook on architectural photography and composition. And I usually start out the first 5 minutes or so of my class at the University of Miami with my young architecture students talking about business and what it means to be a professional. Now, clearly they're not ready to start their own business, but my idea is that when they're ready to start, some of the things that I've discussed in this class will help them when they actually do. So the first thing that I find that's really important, it's not what you charge. I mean, that's important, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But it's how you present your fee schedule that is really important. Here's rule number one, and it's really important. Never give your fee schedule verbally. Only present it in writing. And sometimes this is difficult because you may meet someone at a gathering or meet someone at a meeting and they say, oh, you're an architectural photographer, I'm an architect, how do you charge? What do you charge per day? And sometimes it's almost reflexive. You say, well, this is what I charge. Please don't do that. Ask them for their email, and then you can send them your fee schedule. Don't do it verbally. And there are a couple of reasons why not. One is human nature. Numbers sound larger than when they're written down. And part of this is because during the normal course of the day, the kind of numbers that you discuss for money are usually, let's say under $100. Rarely do you talk about much larger sums unless you're a real estate agent or whatever. But generally, you're talking about numbers $100 or less. When you're talking about your fee schedule, those are probably higher and they sound a lot higher than when they're written down. Number two, presenting your fee schedule verbally subtly implies a kind of negotiation. And for the most part, your fees should be set down on your stationery, on your letterhead, and you send it through email. Those are really not negotiable. Now, should there be some negotiation, those should only be done in writing. And remember, you're providing an invaluable professional service. You're not running a flea market. You're not in the business of negotiating baseball card, how much you're going to charge for a bit. This is much more serious business. So again, only in writing. Now, you want to charge a fee for which you're going to be adequately compensated for your work. And you can look around, you can ask people what they normally charge per day, and you can decide how you want to structure your fee schedule. For a first-time client, I always get a 50% deposit. And this gets them in the job. This gets them motivated to do what you ask them to do. And I always provide a preparation for photography worksheet so that the client knows and their client knows what I expect of them. And also they know that you're not going in there and taking snapshots and you're out of there in 20 minutes, that this is a serious business and you take your work seriously. Now, you can find a preparation for photography worksheet, again, in my ebook. So the preparation for photography and the business guides, honestly, if you're just starting out in business, I think those two appendices in my book are almost worth the price of the book. Now, you can have several fee schedules depending on the kind of client and also depending on where you are. Architects and designers, that may be one fee schedule. Real estate agencies tend to have a lower fee schedule that they're willing to accept. You have to work on that. And with real estate agencies, it's usually dependent on the size of the project. If it's a project selling for $100,000, they may be comfortable with you charging a certain amount. But if it's a $5 million house and it's going to take you a lot longer, then a higher fee schedule is appropriate. Contractors, let me just say right from the start, contractors tend not to want to spend money on photography. But I want to get into how you can bring them into a photography fee schedule. But typically, they are not going to be as willing to pay what, say, an architect or a top-ranked designer will be willing to pay. Manufacturers and fabricators, same thing. They typically don't want to spend as much unless they're paying for you to photograph that they're for advertising for national ads. Now, advertising agencies, that's almost a different story altogether. And one of the things that ad agencies tend to do is ask for a 90-day payment. In other words, you do the work, you hand it in, they pay you in 90 days. I never like that. Once they have the work, I always want to be paid. So I typically don't work with ad agencies. In the days of film, it was difficult to have multiple clients. If you have your client and they're going to share the cost with 2 or 3 other people, and they're going to need the film, you had to double and triple how much film you had to shoot. Now with digital, it's really simple. So because of economics, it's almost the rule now that, say, an architect or designer is going to split the fee with a contractor, with a landscape designer, with the interior designer. And for me, I expect that, I encourage that, because it means that a job may be able to be photographed with multiple clients, that if it was one client alone, they may not just have the ability to pay for that. Now, I charge one client. I charge my primary client, and I let them sort out the rest. If it's, say, 3 or 4 people involved, I don't bill 3 or 4 people. I bill my main client, and then I have them figure out what percentage they want the other people to contribute. And then they all get a copy of the files, which is really easy. You load them on Dropbox, and they get them. One thing I do is insist on, though, I want to know ahead of time how many people are participating and who they are, because I let them all know ahead of time. 1, anytime they use my photos, my credit line has to appear, and 2, under no conditions can any of them distribute these photographs to a third party. I need to know ahead of time. And what I do in this case is, if somebody comes after the fact, I have them contact me, and I have a fee schedule for reuse. Now, for existing photography, you've already shot a job, somebody has seen it and say, oh, I would love to use 3 or 4 or maybe all of your files. I have a fee schedule depending on usage, and for that, I always get paid up front. If it's images they've already seen and they know the quality, they know exactly what they are, I send them an invoice, either a direct invoice or a PayPal invoice that they can pay with a credit card. And I receive payment before I send the files. And I never deviate from that practice, because if they're in a hurry for the files, they'll pay you quickly. But if they're in a hurry for the files, you send them the files, suddenly they're not in such a hurry to pay you. So I never, ever send files without being paid ahead of time. And for existing photography, you can determine your fee schedule for that. If it's, let's say, for an academic book, you may want to charge a certain fee. If it's for advertising, you can charge a certain fee. If it's for an architect or designer, you can charge a certain fee. And let me say, I should maybe mention this earlier. I have a fee schedule that I use for really young architects just starting out. If they care enough about their archives that they're going to ask me to shoot their work, I'm going to try to do whatever I can to accommodate their budget so that they can start their career with really good photography. Now, it has to be someone whose work I like. I'm not going to do this for people whose work I really don't like. But if it's a young architect doing terrific work, I'm going to go out of my way to try to help them. Now, I have clients who I started out like that 20 years ago or so, and now they're doing really well, and they pay the normal fee, and they're happy to do it, and they remember that I was accommodating early in their career, and they have remained loyal clients. Now, as far as any of these fees, especially for existing photography, a very close friend of mine, the late Bob Gelberg, who was a brilliant photographer, taught me 3 important words to say when somebody asks about reusing photos. And that is to say, what's the budget? What's the budget? Generally, that budget for use of your photos may be a lot higher than what you might have proposed. Now, if it's way lower than you think you ought to get, you can simply say, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you a proposal in writing for what I think it should be. And then they have the option of saying yay or nay. But always ask, what's the budget? Now, if they will not give you a budget, if it's for regular photography, you can use your fee schedule, or you can add 20 or 30% to that and see what they say. If it's for existing photography, same thing. You can add a certain percentage onto that and hope that you're getting somewhere around what their real budget was. Most of the time, they will tell you what their budget is. They will simply say, we want to use 4 of your photos, and our budget is, let's say, $250 per photo. Well, that's great if you thought you might have, on the front end, charged them $150. So you can say, okay. So keep in mind the following. You are providing an invaluable and professional service, and you are part of a centuries-old noble tradition. Remember, you're part of the tradition with Piranesi and Vermeer and De Hooch and Sonredam and Canaletto. And not everybody can do this work. So you make sure that you charge accordingly. Also, protect yourself. If you have to travel, if you have to hire an assistant, if you have to buy accessories for the job, make sure you get a deposit up front to cover all of those expenses before you leave the house. Now, if the payment terms are not to your liking, don't take the job. There always will be others. And I discuss in my book a really important point about structuring your business. We are location photographers. We go out to shoot our work. We do not need a studio. We do not need more than a home office. We don't need to be impressing anybody. All that does is it adds to what you have to pay every month. Low overhead, especially when you're starting out, is the same thing as wealth, which means you don't have to take jobs you don't like. You don't have to work with people that you don't like. And that's really important, because if it's someone you don't like, trust me, human nature being what it is, you're not going to do your very best work. So if you have a low overhead, you don't have to take bad jobs. You can turn down a job where they don't want to pay you what you feel that your work is worth. And that gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility. And also, if somebody asks you to shoot a project and you know that, let's say, it's urbanistically bad, that this thing is really horrible for the area in which it was placed, you do not have to use your talents to support that kind of architecture or development that you don't believe in. So again, keep your overhead as low as you possibly can. Charge accordingly and protect yourself. So I hope that these tips, and we're going to do more of these, I hope that these are helpful to you. Thanks for watching. If you want to support the site, please go to StephenBrookePhotography.com and considering purchase a copy of my ebook. It costs you less than lunch. And again, it has everything you need to start architectural photography at the professional level, plus all these other things that I mentioned that we have in there. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.